It was a bright Tuesday morning in Manhattan when James Wilson stepped out of his modest Toyota Camry. At 68 years old, he carried himself with quiet dignity, his silver hair neatly trimmed, and his weekend attire simple but clean. Khaki pants, a plain blue polo shirt, and comfortable walking shoes. Most people would never guess that this humble-looking man owned one of the largest luxury retail chains in the country. James had always believed in staying connected to reality. Despite having a collection of expensive cars and designer suits, he preferred to dress casually when not attending business meetings. Today, he wanted to check on one of his high-end boutiques, Lux & Co., without anyone knowing who he was. His granddaughter Jessica's graduation was coming up next week, and he thought this would be a perfect opportunity to both get her a special gift and see how his staff treated regular customers. As he walked down Fifth Avenue, memories flooded his mind. 35 years ago, he had started as a janitor in this very area, cleaning luxury stores after hours. Through hard work, smart investments, and an unwavering determination, he had built his empire from nothing. Yet the challenges he faced as a black man in the luxury retail industry never truly went away, they just changed form. The gleaming glass doors of Lux & Co. stood before him, the morning sun reflecting off the polished surfaces. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast warm light over displays of expensive handbags, jewelry, and accessories. The store had just opened, and a few early customers, mostly well-dressed women in business attire, were already browsing the new collection. James deliberately took his time entering the store. He noticed how the security guard's eyes followed him a bit too closely, how the sales associates' smiles became slightly fixed when they saw him. These were subtle things that most people might miss, but James had experienced them too many times not to notice. A young Asian sales associate, whose name tag read Sarah Chen, began following him at what she probably thought was a discreet distance. James had to hide a small smile. He had written the store's security protocols himself, but this kind of obvious surveillance was definitely not part of them. He made his way to the handbag section, where the latest collection was displayed. Each piece was a work of art, carefully positioned under perfect lighting. James knew every detail about these bags, from the Italian leather they were made from to the exact profit margin on each piece. He picked up a beautiful dark blue tote bag, examining the stitching with genuine interest. It would be perfect for Jessica, who was starting her first job at a law firm after graduation. "Can I help you with anything?" Sarah's voice was professional, but held a note of suspicion that made James's heart heavy. He had hoped things would be different in his own store. "Yes, I'm looking for a graduation gift for my granddaughter," James replied warmly, trying to put the nervous young woman at ease. "She's finishing law school next week." Sarah's expression flickered with surprise, but before she could respond, a tall man in an expensive suit approached them. James recognized the type immediately, the kind of manager who cared more about appearances than actual service. "Is everything all right here, Sarah?" the man asked, his eyes fixed on James while speaking to the sales associate. His name tag identified him as Bradley Thompson, floor manager. "Yes, Mr. Thompson," Sarah replied quickly. "The gentleman is looking at bags for his granddaughter's graduation." Bradley's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I see. Sir, you should know that these bags start at $5,000. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at our outlet location. I can give you directions." James felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. In all his years, these moments never got easier. He was about to respond when he noticed someone else watching the scene unfold. Rebecca Martinez, his regional director of operations, who happened to be conducting a surprise store visit that day. Their eyes met briefly, and James gave her a supple shake of his head, silently asking her not to intervene. She understood and stayed back, though he could see the tension in her posture. Little did Bradley Thompson know that this ordinary Tuesday morning was about to become one of the most important lessons of his career, and this simple interaction would change the entire culture of Lux & Co. forever. Bradley Thompson stood there with his practiced smile, waiting for James to accept his suggestion about visiting the outlet store. The morning light streaming through the boutique's windows highlighted the obvious discomfort on Sarah Chen's face as she watched the interaction unfold. James calmly held the blue designer bag in his hands, examining its gold hardware with experienced eyes. "Actually," he said quietly, "I'd like to see more options in this price range. My granddaughter deserves the best for her law school graduation." Bradley's smile tightened. He glanced at Sarah, then back at James, clearly struggling to maintain his professional demeanor. Other customers in the store began to take notice of the situation, some watching openly while others pretended to be absorbed in their shopping. "Sir," Bradley said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow managed to sound both polite and threatening, "we have certain standards to maintain here. Our regular customers expect a particular atmosphere." He straightened his designer tie, trying to emphasize the difference between his expensive suit and James's casual clothing. From her corner, Rebecca Martinez continued to observe, her hand tightening around her tablet computer. As regional director, she had seen her share of uncomfortable situations, but watching her boss, the owner of the company, being treated this way made her blood boil. Still, she respected his silent request to let things play out. A well-dressed woman nearby picked up the same style of bag James was holding, and immediately, Sarah's colleague Lisa rushed to assist her with enthusiastic attention. The contrast in treatment was stark and obvious. James noticed how Lisa complimented the customer's choice and began showing her additional matching accessories. "Perhaps," James said, still maintaining his calm demeanor, "you could show me the same level of service that young lady is receiving?" He nodded toward the other customer. Bradley's face flushed red. "Sir, I don't appreciate what you're implying. We treat all potential customers the same way." He emphasized the word potential in a way that made his meaning clear. Sarah shifted uncomfortably beside them. Being new to the job, she wasn't sure what to do. She had followed Bradley's lead in treating James with suspicion, but something about the older man's dignified behavior made her increasingly ashamed of her actions. "I've been standing here for 15 minutes, James continued, his voice steady and clear, "and I've watched 6 other customers enter the store. Each one received a warm greeting and immediate assistance. I, however, was followed and watched like a potential thief." A few other customers stopped pretending not to listen. An elderly white woman wearing pearls looked at Bradley with disapproval, while a young professional couple whispered to each other, shaking their heads at the manager's behavior. "That's not at all what happened," Bradley protested, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "We simply want to ensure that all our customers find the right products for their budget and lifestyle." James placed the blue bag carefully back on its display shelf. With deliberate movements, he reached into his pocket. Bradley tensed, but James only pulled out his phone. The manager relaxed slightly, probably assuming James was going to call someone to complain. Instead, James opened his photo gallery and pulled up a picture from last week's board meeting. He held up the phone, showing a photo of himself in an expensive suit, sitting at the head of a conference table surrounded by business executives. "Tell me, Mr. Thompson," James said quietly, "what sort of lifestyle would you say this suggests?" Bradley's eyes widened as he looked at the photo, but he still didn't make the connection. I don't understand what this has to do with anything." Sarah, however, had moved closer to look at the photo. Her face suddenly went pale as she recognized the Lux & Co. boardroom in the background. She had seen it during her orientation video. Rebecca Martinez chose this moment to walk a few steps closer, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She wanted to be within earshot for what was about to happen next. After all, this would become a story that would be told in every Lux & Co. training session for years to come. James Wilson straightened his shoulders, ready to reveal his identity. The next few moments would change everything, not just for Bradley and Sarah, but for the entire company's approach to customer service and equality. The tension in the store reached its peak as James Wilson reached into his jacket pocket again, this time pulling out a small leather wallet. Bradley Thompson watched nervously, while Sarah Chen seemed frozen in place. The other customers had stopped pretending to shop and were openly watching the scene unfold. "Mr. Thompson," James began, his voice carrying clearly through the quiet store, "do you know what the W in Lux & Co.'s official company name stands for?" Bradley blinked in confusion. "Of course, it's Wilson International Luxury Group, doing business as Lux & Co. Every employee learns that during orientation." He said this with a hint of pride, clearly thinking he was showing off his knowledge. "And have you ever met James Wilson, the CEO and owner?" James asked calmly, opening his wallet. "No, sir," Bradley replied, his voice carrying a touch of impatience. "Mr. Wilson rarely visits individual stores. He's quite busy running the company from the corporate office." James pulled out his company ID card and held it up. Actually, Mr. Thompson, I make it a point to visit my stores regularly. I just don't always announce myself. The color drained from Bradley's face as he stared at the ID card. There was in clear, official print: James Wilson, Chief Executive Officer and Chairman. The photo matched the elderly black man standing before him, though it showed him in a business suit rather than today's casual clothes. Sarah let out a small gasp. Her hands began to shake slightly as she realized she had been following the company's owner around like a suspicious character. The other sales associates who had been pretending to be busy nearby stopped all pretense of working and stared openly. Rebecca Martinez finally stepped forward, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "Good morning, Mr. Wilson," she said respectfully. "I wasn't expecting to see you here during my store inspection." Bradley's face had turned from white to a sickly shade of gray. "Mr. Wilson, I had no idea. Please, let me explain." James held up his hand, silencing Bradley's stuttered apologies. "Mr. Thompson, I'd like you to gather all available staff in the break room. Ms. Martinez, would you please assist in covering the floor while we have a discussion?" Rebecca nodded professionally, though there was a slight smile on her face. She had seen many teaching moments in her career, but this one would surely be memorable. The news spread through the store like wildfire. Customers who had witnessed the scene were now whispering among themselves. The elderly woman with pearls approached James directly. "Sir," she said firmly, "I saw everything that happened here today, and I want you to know that I'll be writing to corporate about this incident." She paused when James smiled. "Oh, I suppose you are corporate, aren't you?" James chuckled warmly. "Yes, ma'am, I am, but please, feel free to write that letter. Every piece of feedback helps us improve." As Bradley gathered the staff, Sarah stood rooted to her spot, tears forming in her eyes. James turned to her with a gentle expression. "Miss Chen," he said softly, "you're new here, aren't you?" "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Just 3 weeks. I'm so sorry, Mr. Wilson. I was just following what I thought was protocol, but I knew it felt wrong." James nodded understandingly. "Sometimes the most important lessons come from our mistakes, Sarah. Would you join us in the break room? I think you might have valuable insights to share." The store's regular activities were temporarily suspended as Rebecca handled the few customers present, explaining that there would be a brief staff meeting. The murmurs and whispers continued as James made his way to the break room, followed by a very subdued Bradley and a nervous Sarah. As they walked, James thought about all the similar experiences he'd had over the years. Both before and after becoming successful, he hadn't planned on conducting a training session today, but sometimes the best teaching opportunities came unexpectedly. This would be a lesson that none of his employees would ever forget. In the break room, the staff waited anxiously. They were about to learn that true luxury wasn't just about expensive products. It was about treating every person with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or clothing. The break room of Lux & Co. was cramped with 15 employees sitting around the small conference table. James Wilson stood at the head of the table, his casual clothing now carrying a different meaning to the staff who sat before him. Bradley Thompson sat in the corner, his earlier confidence completely gone, while Sarah Chen nervously played with her name tag. "First," James began, looking around the room, "I want everyone to relax. This isn't a firing squad." A few nervous laughs broke the tension slightly. "What happened today is actually a valuable opportunity for all of us to learn and grow." He walked slowly around the table as he spoke. "When I was young, I couldn't even dream of walking into a store like this one. Not because I couldn't afford it, though I couldn't, but because I wouldn't have been allowed through the front door." The room was completely silent. Even the usual sounds of the air conditioning seemed muted as everyone focused on James's words. "I started as a janitor," he continued, "cleaning luxury stores after hours. I watched how the salespeople treated different customers during the day. I noticed things, important things." He paused near Bradley. "Would anyone like to guess what I noticed?" A young man raised his hand hesitantly. "Was it about how they treated people differently based on how they looked?" James nodded. "Exactly. The expensive clothes, the designer bags, the jewelry, these things became passwords to good service. But I saw something else too. I saw how much business these stores lost by judging books by their covers." He pulled out his phone and showed them some photos. "See this woman? She came into a luxury store wearing gym clothes. The staff ignored her. She went to another store and spent $50,000 on jewelry. She was a famous athlete. He swiped to another photo. This man in old jeans and a t-shirt. He owns 3 tech companies. He was dismissed from a high-end store and took his corporate gift account worth millions elsewhere. Sarah raised her hand timidly. Mr. Wilson, is that why you came in dressed casually today? Very observant, Sarah. James smiled. Yes, I regularly visit our stores this way. Sometimes I dress in expensive suits, sometimes like this. The difference in treatment is educational. Bradley shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mr. Wilson, I want to apologize again. Mr. Thompson, James interrupted gently. I'm not interested in apologies. I'm interested in change. Tell me, what was your first thought when I walked in? Bradley's face reddened, but he answered honestly. I thought you might be here to cause trouble, or that you couldn't afford anything. And why did you think that? The room was silent as Bradley struggled to answer. Finally, he said quietly, because of how you were dressed, and because of your race. James nodded appreciatively at Bradley's honesty. Recognizing our biases is the first step to overcoming them. Everyone in this room has biases. Everyone in this world does. The question is, what do we do about them? He pulled up another photo on his phone, this time of himself at his granddaughter's law school graduation ceremony. The young lady in this photo is why I came in today. I wanted to buy her a graduation gift, but more importantly, I want to build a world where she never has to experience what happened to me today. One of the older employees spoke up. So what changes do we need to make, Mr. Wilson? James smiled warmly. That's exactly the right question. Starting tomorrow, we're implementing new training programs. But first, I want to hear from all of you. What did you observe today? What would you do differently? The discussion that followed was honest, sometimes uncomfortable, but deeply meaningful. Even Bradley began to contribute thoughtfully, his earlier shame turning into determination to be part of the solution. As the meeting continued, Rebecca Martinez took notes on her tablet. This unexpected training session would become the foundation for a new company-wide program. Sometimes the best teaching moments couldn't be planned. They had to be experienced. Outside in the store, customers were returning, unaware that a quiet transformation was taking place in the break room. A transformation that would soon spread throughout all of Lux & Co.'s locations, changing not just one store's culture, but setting a new standard for the entire luxury retail industry. After the powerful meeting in the break room, James Wilson returned to the sales floor with his staff. The atmosphere had changed dramatically. Every employee now looked at their workplace through new eyes, understanding that true luxury wasn't just about expensive products. It was about treating everyone with dignity and respect. Bradley Thompson, who had been so dismissive earlier, approached James with a different kind of nervousness. Mr. Wilson, if you're still interested, I'd like to personally help you find the perfect graduation gift for your granddaughter. James smiled warmly. Thank you, Bradley, but I think this would be a good opportunity for Sarah to help me. After all, she's closer to my granddaughter's age and might have some fresh perspectives. Sarah Chen stepped forward, no longer afraid but eager to prove herself. I would be honored, Mr. Wilson. You mentioned she's graduating from law school? We just received some beautiful professional bags that would be perfect for a young lawyer. As Sarah led James back to the handbag display, other employees returned to their positions, but there was something different about how they carried themselves. They began greeting every customer who walked through the door with genuine warmth, regardless of their appearance. Rebecca Martinez watched with satisfaction as Sarah expertly showed James various options, explaining the features of each bag with enthusiasm and knowledge. The young sales associate was no longer following James like a security guard, but treating him like the valued customer he always should have been. This one, Sarah said, reaching for the blue bag James had looked at earlier, has a padded laptop compartment and multiple organizer pockets. It's perfect for carrying legal documents and a computer. She paused thoughtfully. But may I show you another option? We have it in burgundy, which is a very professional color. James nodded, impressed by her natural ability to connect with customers when she wasn't clouded by prejudice. My granddaughter's favorite color is actually burgundy. How did you know? Sarah smiled, bringing out the bag. I didn't. I just thought about what I would want if I were starting my professional career. Something classic but not boring, professional but with personality. While they discussed the bags, Bradley was busy making his own changes. He gathered the security team and revised their monitoring protocols, emphasizing that suspicious behavior, not appearance, should be their only concern. He also started planning a staff workshop on unconscious bias, something he never thought he'd be passionate about. A wealthy-looking woman entered the store wearing designer clothes from head to toe. At the same time, a teenager in jeans and a hoodie walked in. James watched with interest as his staff handled both customers with equal respect and attention. The transformation was already beginning. "Mr. Wilson," Sarah said, carefully wrapping the burgundy bag they had selected. "Thank you for teaching us such an important lesson today. I'll never forget it." James patted her hand gently. "Sometimes the best lessons come from our mistakes, Sarah. The important thing is what we learn from them." Rebecca approached with some paperwork in her hands. "Mr. Wilson, I drafted an initial outline for the new training program based on today's events. Would you like to review it?" "Actually," James replied, "I'd like Bradley and Sarah to review it first. They experienced this situation from different perspectives, and their insights would be valuable." Bradley, who was nearby, looked surprised but grateful for the chance to contribute positively. Sarah beamed with pride at being included in such an important project. As James prepared to leave the store with his granddaughter's gift, he noticed something remarkable. The entire atmosphere of the boutique had shifted. Customers of all backgrounds were being helped with genuine care and attention. The security guard was greeting people with a smile instead of suspicion. Even the way employees interacted with each other seemed more authentic and respectful. Standing at the door, James turned to Rebecca. "Sometimes it takes an uncomfortable moment to create lasting change," he said quietly. "Make sure this story is told in every store we own, not to shame anyone, but to teach everyone." Rebecca nodded, understanding that they had all witnessed something powerful, the beginning of a real transformation in not just their store, but potentially the entire luxury retail industry. It had taken an insulting experience to create this change, but sometimes the best transformations come from the most unexpected moments. 1 month had passed since the incident at Lux & Co.'s Manhattan store. James Wilson sat in his office on the 30th floor of the company headquarters, reviewing the changes that had taken place. On his desk lay several reports, customer feedback forms, and a particularly interesting letter from Bradley Thompson. Bradley's letter detailed the transformations he had implemented in the store over the past month. He had completely reorganized the staff training program, focusing on treating every customer with equal respect and dignity. The results were already showing in their sales numbers. They had seen a 40% increase in customer satisfaction and a 25% rise in sales. Sarah Chen had also flourished in her role. She had been promoted to head of customer experience for the Manhattan store, and her new training methods were being adopted by other branches. Her personal story of transformation from that day had become a powerful teaching tool. James picked up a framed photo from his desk. It showed his granddaughter Jessica at her law school graduation, proudly carrying the burgundy bag he had bought that day. She had cried when he told her the story behind the gift, and now she used it as an example in her corporate law classes about the importance of ethical business practices. A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. Rebecca Martinez entered, carrying a thick folder. "Good morning, Mr. Wilson," she said, taking a seat across from him. "I have the 1-month impact report you requested." James leaned forward with interest. "Tell me everything, Rebecca." She opened the folder and began sharing the findings. "The changes have been remarkable. After we shared your experience with all our stores, we've seen improvements across the board. Customer complaints about discrimination have dropped to nearly zero. Sales are up in every location." "And Bradley's store?" James asked. Rebecca smiled. "It's now our top-performing location. Bradley has become one of our most passionate advocates for inclusive customer service. He's even started a mentorship program for new employees, teaching them about unconscious bias and professional dignity." James nodded approvingly. "And how is Sarah doing with her new responsibilities?" "Excellent," Rebecca replied. "She's created a customer service approach we're calling the Wilson Welcome, treating every person who walks through our doors like they could be the owner of the company. The staff has really embraced it." The phone on James's desk buzzed. His secretary's voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Wilson, Bradley Thompson is here for his scheduled meeting." "Send him in," James responded. Bradley entered the office, looking very different from the arrogant manager of a month ago. He carried himself with a new kind of confidence, not the false superiority of before, but the genuine confidence of someone who had learned and grown from their mistakes. Mr. Wilson, Bradley began, I wanted to show you our latest initiative. He opened his laptop and showed them a presentation. We're calling it Beyond the Cover. It's a training program that helps staff recognize and overcome their prejudices. James watched as Bradley explained the program with genuine enthusiasm. The same man who had tried to send him to an outlet store was now teaching others about equality and respect. It was a powerful reminder that people could change when given the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. There's more, Bradley continued. We've started reaching out to local business schools, offering internships to students from diverse backgrounds. We want to change the face of luxury retail from the ground up. Rebecca added, several other high-end retailers have noticed our changes. They've been asking about our training programs. We could be starting a movement in the industry. James stood up and walked to his office window, looking out over the city. He thought about all the times he had been judged, dismissed, and underestimated. Now, those experiences were becoming catalysts for change. This is exactly what I hoped would happen, he said quietly. Sometimes it takes one difficult moment to start a revolution of kindness. The three of them spent the next hour discussing future plans and initiatives. What had started as an insulting experience in a luxury boutique was growing into something much bigger, a transformation of an entire industry's culture, one store at a time. 6 months after the incident, Lux & Co. held its annual company conference in New York City. The main ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel was filled with over 500 employees from stores across the country. James Wilson stood backstage, preparing to give the most important speech of his career. Sarah Chen and Bradley Thompson were seated in the front row, both now wearing the gold pins that marked them as regional training directors. In just 6 months, they had helped transform Lux & Co.'s entire approach to customer service, and their story had spread throughout the retail industry. Rebecca Martinez stepped onto the stage first. Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm honored to introduce someone who taught us all an unforgettable lesson about dignity, respect, and the true meaning of luxury. Please welcome our CEO and founder, Mr. James Wilson. The applause was thunderous as James walked to the podium. He was wearing the same casual clothes he had worn that day in the Manhattan store, a deliberate choice that made several employees smile in recognition. 6 months ago, James began, I walked into one of our stores dressed exactly like this. What happened that day changed not just our company, but my view of what we could achieve together. He clicked a button, and pictures appeared on the giant screen behind him. They showed the new training programs, the diverse group of employees now working in their stores, and the impressive sales figures that have followed their changes. Our sales have increased by 50% across all stores, James continued. But more importantly, our customer satisfaction ratings have reached record highs. We've proven that treating everyone with respect isn't just the right thing to do. It's good business. In the audience, Bradley nodded, remembering how wrong he had been about judging customers by their appearance. Next to him, Sarah wiped away a tear, thinking about how far they had come from that day. But today, I want to share something even more exciting, James said, his voice filled with pride. The Wilson Welcome Program, created by our own Sarah Chen, has been adopted by 15 other luxury retail chains. Bradley Thompson's Beyond the Cover training is now being taught in business schools. The screen showed newspaper headlines praising Lux & Co.'s revolutionary approach to customer service. Fashion magazines had written articles about how the company was changing the face of luxury retail. We've hired 200 new employees from diverse backgrounds, James continued. Our internship program, which Bradley started, has partnered with 20 universities. But the number I'm most proud of is 0. That's how many discrimination complaints we've received in the past 5 months. The audience broke into applause again. James waited for it to quiet down before continuing. Yesterday, my granddaughter Jessica, who just won her first major case as a lawyer, visited our Manhattan store. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, carrying that burgundy bag we sold her. He smiled at the memory. The welcome she received wasn't because she's my granddaughter. No one knew that. It was because every customer now gets treated like they could be the owner of the company. Rebecca joined him on stage with a large covered object. Mr. Wilson, The board of directors has a surprise for you. She unveiled a beautiful plaque made of crystal and gold. It read, "The Wilson Standard, where luxury meets equality. Established 2024. This plaque, Rebecca announced, will hang in every Lux & Co. store worldwide. It will remind us that true luxury isn't about expensive products. It's about treating everyone with dignity and respect." James looked at the plaque, then at his employees. He saw Bradley, who had transformed from a prejudiced manager into a champion of equality. He saw Sarah, whose genuine remorse had turned into innovative leadership. He saw hundreds of faces, all committed to making sure no one would ever feel unwelcome in their stores again. "Thank you," he said softly. "But this isn't about me. This is about all of us choosing to be better, to do better, every single day. Remember, we're not just selling luxury items. We're creating an experience where everyone feels valued and respected." The standing ovation that followed lasted several minutes. James Wilson stood on stage, overwhelmed with emotion, knowing that what had started as an insult had grown into a movement that would change lives for generations to come. 1 year after the incident that changed everything, James Wilson stood in front of the Manhattan store where it all began. The early morning sun reflected off the new golden plaque beside the entrance. "The Wilson Standard, where luxury meets equality." He smiled, remembering how a simple shopping trip had sparked a retail revolution. Inside, the store had transformed. The sales floor was bustling with a diverse team of employees, all wearing pins that read "Wilson Welcome Ambassador." Sarah Chen, now the National Director of Customer Experience, was training a new group of employees using the very story of how she had once followed James around the store. Today, Sarah told her trainees, "I'm going to share a story about the biggest mistake that became our greatest lesson." The new employees listened intently as she pointed to the photograph on the training room wall, a picture of James in his casual clothes from that fateful day. Bradley Thompson, who had recently been promoted to Vice President of Corporate Culture, walked in carrying an armful of newspapers. The headlines told the story of their success. "Lux & Co. sets new standard in retail equality. Wilson Welcome Revolution spreads across industry, from prejudice to progress. How one man changed luxury retail." "Mr. Wilson," Bradley called out, "I think you'll want to see these numbers." He handed James a report with pride. "Our company's value has doubled in the past year, but more importantly, we trained over 5,000 employees from other retailers in our inclusion programs." Rebecca Martinez joined them, carrying a special gift bag. "Do you know what today is, Mr. Wilson?" James nodded. 1 year since that day. "Yes," Rebecca smiled, "and we have something to show you." She led James to the break room, which had been transformed into a small museum of sorts. The walls were covered with photographs and news articles documenting their journey. In the center was a display case containing the casual clothes James had worn that day, preserved as a reminder of how appearances can deceive. Next to it stood a television playing interviews with customers whose lives had been touched by the company's new approach. "But that's not all," Sarah said excitedly. "Show him the letters, Bradley." Bradley opened a large box filled with thousands of letters from customers and employees around the world. Each one shared a story of how the Wilson Standard had changed their experience in luxury retail. One letter caught James's eye. It was from a young black entrepreneur who wrote, "I walked into a Lux & Co. store in jeans and a t-shirt. Instead of judgment, I found respect. I bought my first business suit there, and now my tech company is worth millions. Thank you for changing the game." James's granddaughter Jessica appeared in the doorway, surprising him. She was carrying her burgundy bag, now slightly worn from daily use in court. "Grandpa, you didn't think we'd let this anniversary pass without celebrating, did you?" She handed him a small package. Inside was a framed photograph of the original store security footage from that day, showing James walking in wearing his casual clothes. Below it was engraved, "The day that changed everything, when dignity became our true luxury." "Your story is now taught in my law school's business ethics class," Jessica said proudly. "And 5 other law schools have added it to their curriculum." James looked around the room at his team. Bradley, who had transformed from a prejudiced manager into a champion of change. Sarah, whose mistake had led to revolutionary customer service training. Rebecca, who had helped build it all into a movement. "You know," James said thoughtfully, "that day could have ended very differently. I could have gotten angry. fired everyone, made headlines for all the wrong reasons. But sometimes the best response to prejudice isn't punishment, it's education. The group nodded in agreement. Through the break room window, they could see the store filing up with customers of all backgrounds, each one receiving the famous Wilson welcome. 1 year ago, James concluded, I walked into this store hoping to buy a graduation gift. Instead, we created a gift that keeps giving, the gift of dignity, respect, and true equality in luxury retail. Outside, a new customer entered the store wearing worn jeans and a simple t-shirt. The entire team watched with pride as their staff rushed to welcome them with genuine warmth and respect, proving that the Wilson Standard wasn't just a plaque on the wall, it was a revolution in action.